A gold farmer group is an organised group of people who are paid to just get gold from a game and then sell that gold for real-world cash.
Some call them gold farmers, others call them cheats. They are exploiting the fast-growing phenomena of online gaming.
Quite often, those people would be running hundreds of accounts, hundreds of botted accounts, which were getting all these resources and selling those resources to other players in the game and then getting RuneScape gold. And then actually creating websites, very official looking websites, where you could enter your credit card details and then organise to buy that gold from one of these gold farmers in the game.
For hours on end, they sit in the gloom of an airless outhouse, hunched over computers, pitting their wits against opponents on another continent. They are working in a virtual world, but this is a real-life sweatshop.
Really disturbingly for us, we discovered that there was all sorts of links between gold farming and kind of other illegal activities and really quite dodgy parts of business going all over the world, and we were really, really fundamentally committed to stopping it from happening in our game.
We had such a large player base that some of these companies were earning, millions of dollars. I'm pretty sure that some of them, may have even been building, a company with the same sort of revenue that Jagex actually had from just that.
You may be thinking, who cares? It's just fake points in a make-believe world, but it costs $60 a year to play, hours of time to gain power, and there are dozens of websites offering coins to use in RuneScape for a fee.
It was really obvious to everybody that was playing the game that these accounts weren't real, and they were being run by programs, and it really started to upset the fundamental balance of the game.
When you walk up to 4 or 5 people and no one's saying anything, and it's very obvious that they're just doing the same pattern over and over again, and they're controlled by a piece of software. Cheating aside, that's just a pretty rubbish experience. It doesn't feel like a cool game with real people playing it, really.
All this extra gold sloshing around in the game means that the real gold that's been earned actually is devalued when buying stuff. So something that may have cost you 1 million gold pieces is actually now only worth 500,000. And this is really difficult for players to kind of invest in their accounts, because all of that hard work again is undermined by gold farming.
A lot of people left the game because of botting and gold farming. It really ruined the experience for gamers.
It challenged the players to really search inside themselves, to value their own accomplishments and ignore what was going on around them, because it was a very tough environment to play in when you were going for an achievement and so were 35 bots behind you.
It really undermines the integrity of RuneScape.
Another problem with this kind of illegal activity that the gold farmers were doing was stolen credit cards, and they were using those numbers to make accounts. And so when people realised their cards were being used illegally, they would contact their banks and they would get all of the illegal payments charged back to the account.
It was getting to the stage where the credit card companies themselves were saying, we're not going to accept your credit cards because you're getting so many people charging back because of the stolen credit cards that we think you're too dodgy a person to actually accept credit cards if you don't do something about it. And at that point we're like, if we accept credit card payments, then we really are screwed.
We got to the point where we were like, there's only 2 ways we can possibly tackle this. We can either, A, start selling the items ourselves, because that will basically dry up their market and they won't have any financial incentive to keep breaking our countermeasures, or we can do something really radical. We had one idea for how we could just completely break them that we didn't think they'd be able to work out, which is by restricting the trades.
After so many meetings and lots of discussions, we made the decision, which we didn't take lightly, to remove free trade from the game, which meant a lot of players couldn't, pass items to each other, they couldn't give gifts or presents to each other. That was pretty huge. But it did also mean that for these bots that were passing wealth to their mules, they couldn't do that anymore. Those mules that were passing it to players for real-world cash, they couldn't do that anymore. It also meant that we'd affected player versus player killing, because people were going into the wilderness to gain each other's weapons or gain each other's gold. This was done in the wilderness, and that obviously made the wilderness a vastly different place.
Before the change, the wilderness was probably the busiest place in RuneScape, and then overnight that just changed, and there was all of a sudden just no one going there. There was no point. All of a sudden the most popular place became the least popular.
So you could still go into the wilderness, but it was dead. It was supposed to be dead, right? There were bones and skeletons and demons and lava and all that kind of stuff all over the place. But there weren't any players anymore. So it was a really disturbing experience, actually, walking around in areas of the game world where previously it was full of carnage, and then it wasn't really full of anything at all.
The removal of the wilderness was, I would say, the biggest, most dramatic event in RuneScape history, and it was unique in that it united a community against Jagex.
I don't know if a game could riot any harder than I remember those World 66 riots that were going on for, I think, an entire week or so after that update happened.
Goodwill between players and Jagex was never quite the same again after that, I don't think, or at least for a very long time. It was not quite as good.
We'd made a change that they didn't like, and they couldn't really understand why we'd made it. We tried to explain, but, you know, it sounds like excuses. And I think a lot of people just thought we were making it up. So it didn't help things at all.
I think that kind of almost insular approach of, look, you know, it is what it is, get on with it, meant that the company didn't engage.
I mean, if there's one thing I could change, going back now, it'd be that decision in 2007 when we decided to get rid of the real-world trading.
With free trade removed, gold farmers initially disappeared. Bots were on a manageable scale again, but the cost had been high.
It looked like, to a lot of players, we'd killed the game because the areas were less busy and there were all these people complaining and saying that they were going to quit. So it was a really bad time. And remember, we thought we'd done the right thing and it just didn't look good.
Over the next 3 years, RuneScape faced something it had never faced before: a decline. Player numbers dwindled, and the relationship between Jagex and its players hit rock bottom. It was time to make a big gesture, for the company to come down from its ivory tower and meet its players face to face. And more importantly, this was an opportunity to explain why it had made these dramatic decisions.
Good afternoon! How are you all doing?
We decided to do RuneFest because we wanted to do the ultimate community event. We've done a few small things here and there, but we wanted to have an opportunity to meet players en masse, and also to have a platform to tell players about what we wanted to do in the future, and to share with them the things that we were most excited about.
Yeah, let's look around the office. This is actually a pretty cool company with some pretty cool people. We're not trying to manufacture anything here, but we have to give the world a lens into this business. So we have to do a fan celebration.
Good morning, Gillingham!
We were worried that people were going to be horrifically disappointed that what we put on wasn't going to be good enough, and we were actually so worried about it that we actually made the decision to refund everybody's ticket price for the first RuneFest. So all the people who went to the regional RuneFest got their money back and still had the tickets. They all went for free. Because we didn't want to let anyone down, and we still put the event on, but we just thought it wasn't going to be very good, and it was stupid because it was brilliant. Everyone went, oh, I'm so going to the next one. Everyone loved it, and we're like, why did we do that? Why did we doubt ourselves?
I don't think we realised how important RuneFest was going to be really until, you know, we'd done it, and once we'd done it, we knew that, you know, there was a real need for RuneScapers to come together. There's nothing better than like meeting the people that you've been playing RuneScape with for years, to suddenly meet them in person, and everyone's in cosplay, and if that wasn't your thing, then you might want to come and meet the developers behind the games.
You know, you had 70-year-old grandmas with 16, 17-year-old teenagers. It showed the breadth of our community. It was fantastic, and you know, everyone was so happy to meet one another and finally put a face to a name.
How long did this costume take to make?
About 200 hours.
200 hours?
Yes.
Have you come a long way today?
From Canada.
You get to find out what they love about the game. You get to see that in their faces, and that just changes every update. You're no longer thinking about like what the forum's going to say. You're thinking about individual people. You're thinking about the looks on their faces as they play something. You want to surprise them.
It just goes to show that the game goes beyond just the barriers of, you know, a virtual world. It spills into real life, which is amazing.
RuneFest gave everyone at Jagex a spring in their step. But Andrew was beginning to feel distanced from the game he had created.
I wanted to get myself in a position where I could still advise Jagex and still, you know, I loved RuneScape. I absolutely wanted to keep working on it, but I didn't want the responsibility and the stress of being in charge of something so big and so important. So I started looking at selling